Some roads aren't meant to be traveled. Some stories were never meant to be heard. Across America, scattered between forgotten highways, lifeless fields, and silent towns, lie moments of pure terror, experienced by real people who never imagined they'd become part of a nightmare. You won't find these tales in books. You'll find them in late-night police reports, in journal entries stained with fear, or in the shaky voices of those who barely made it out. Tonight, you'll hear 15 of the most chilling true horror stories from across the United States, each one a glimpse into something unexplainable and unforgettable. But be warned, these stories have a way of following you. They linger, they echo, and sometimes they wake up when you press play. Ready? In the heart of a city where crime whispered through every shadowed alley, I stood as the lone guardian of a mid-sized office building, a silent sentinel in a night that felt alive with hidden threats. The building was an unremarkable structure, nestled among the towering giants of the downtown skyline, its glass facade reflecting the flickering lights of a restless urban sprawl. I had been a security guard here for years, patrolling its corridors during the witching hours, a job made necessary by the high crime rates that plagued the area. Break-ins were a constant threat, businesses often losing fortunes to the shadows that crept in after dark. Usually I had a partner to share the long nights, but for this month I was alone, the company training a new recruit to eventually join me. I didn't mind the solitude. It was quieter, though it made staying awake a challenge. The silence, a heavy weight that pressed against my senses. The absence of a partner also meant no distractions, no idle chatter to break the monotony, just the hum of the building systems and the distant buzz of the city outside. What dangers lurk in the stillness of this night, watching from the edges of my vision? 2 weeks into this solitary stretch, as I patrolled the parking lot under the dim glow of streetlights, I first noticed them. 2 figures standing across the street, their silhouettes shrouded in the darkness, their gazes fixed in my direction. The night was cold, the air sharp against my skin, carrying the faint scent of exhaust and damp asphalt, and their presence sent a ripple of unease through me. Were they watching the building, or me? I couldn't tell, their features obscured by the distance and the shadows, but the weight of their stare was palpable, a silent warning that stirred my instincts. On my next round, they were gone, vanishing into the night as if they'd never been there, leaving me to question whether I'd imagined them. I noted the encounter in my mind, a fleeting concern I brushed aside, the rest of the shift passing in uneventful quiet until I clocked out at 6:09 a.m., the dawn breaking over the city with no further signs of trouble. The next few days were equally calm, the memory of those figures fading into the background of my routine, until the end of the week brought them back. There they were again, standing in the same spot, their eyes cutting through the darkness, watching me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. The unease returned, sharper this time, and instead of continuing my rounds, I lingered on that side of the building, pacing back and forth under the streetlights, hoping my presence would deter them. After 5 minutes, they turned and walked away, disappearing into the night, and I stayed another 15 minutes, ensuring they didn't return, before heading back inside, my nerves still on edge. With the figures gone, I decided it was a good time to take my lunch. Retreating to the break room at the far end of the building, a small space tucked away at the end of a long hallway. It was 1 a.m., the building cloaked in a silence so deep it seemed to hum, the fluorescent lights casting a sterile glow over the linoleum floor. I sat at a table, the faint scent of my sandwich mingling with the stale air scrolling through my phone to pass the time, when a sudden sound pierced the quiet, a sharp, unsettling noise that echoed from the hallway beyond. My breath caught, the sandwich forgotten as I set my phone down, my eyes darting to the doorway, the silence now a heavy shroud around me. I'd never heard anything like that before, not in all my years here, and for a moment I sat frozen, straining to hear it again. After a tense 30 seconds, I rose, my footsteps cautious as I approached the doorway, peering into the hallway. But the silence had returned, absolute and unbroken. I convinced myself it was nothing, a trick of the building settling in the night, and returned to my meal, finishing it quickly before heading to the security office to check the system. The monitors showed no alerts, no flags, everything in order. And I settled into my chair, the usual routine of waiting out the night stretching before me. But something gnawed at me, a curiosity, or perhaps a lingering unease about that sound, urging me to go on another round to search for its source. I began my patrol outside, the night air biting at my skin, the streetlights buzzing faintly as I circled the building, finding nothing but the empty lot and the distant hum of the city. I moved inside, walking through the L-shaped hallway that stretched the length of the building, one end leading to the main entrance, the other to a stairwell with an old emergency exit. The door was a relic, a heavy metal slab from the building's early days, disconnected from the modern security system, its vulnerability bypassed by a massive padlock that kept it sealed. But as I reached the end of the hallway and peered through the door's window, my heart stopped. The padlock lay on the floor, broken in half, the metal door forced open, its hinges groaning under the strain of an unseen intrusion. A wave of dizziness washed over me, my mind reeling as I hurried back to the security office, my pulse racing with the realization that someone had broken in, someone I hadn't seen, hadn't heard, despite my vigilance. I pulled up the camera footage, my hands trembling as I scanned the tapes, and there they were. The two men I'd seen earlier, slipping around the back of the building while I stood watch outside, breaking the lock and entering the workrooms. Disturbingly, they were still inside when I returned, one of them hiding just 2 feet from me, on the other side of a door I'd passed, his presence a silent threat I'd narrowly escaped. They'd fled when I went on my final round. The noise I'd heard, likely one of them brushing against a desk in their haste to hide. The footage revealed more. They carried weapons, large knives, or possibly small firearms strapped to their belts, a chilling indication of their readiness to confront me if necessary. I called the police, handing over the tapes, but the quality was poor, their faces obscured, and no arrests were made. The company reported several hard drives and files stolen, their concern palpable, but to this day, no further information has surfaced about the men or their motives. What were they after? And what would they have done if they'd found me in their path? The thought lingers, a shadow that haunts my every patrol, a reminder of how close I came to a danger I never saw coming, lurking in the very building I was meant to protect. What if the person you thought left never really went away, but was hiding closer than you could imagine? In my mid-20s, I balanced online school with a night shift job at a 7-Eleven on the quieter side of town. The store was a small, fluorescent-lit haven, its shelves stocked with snacks and essentials, and I liked the gig because it was usually slow enough for me to get some studying done. Most nights, I was the only one there, the hum of the coolers my only company as I typed away on my laptop, working on assignments between the rare customers who wandered in. I'd push my laptop aside when someone entered, ring them up, and return to my schoolwork as soon as they left. The rhythm of the night as predictable as the flickering neon sign outside. That night, a biting chill hung in the air, rain pattering steadily against the windows, creating a sheen of droplets that blurred the view of the empty parking lot. I loved nights like this. The cold and rain kept customers away, leaving me in peace to focus. For nearly 2 hours, I'd been deep into a research paper, my fingers flying across the keyboard, the glow of the screen casting shadows on the counter. Then, the front door swung open, the bell above it jarring me from my focus. A man stepped inside, his presence heavy in the quiet store. He looked to be in his 30s with a scruffy beard and short dark hair, his jacket damp from the rain. I set my laptop aside, offering a polite nod as he wandered the aisles, his steps slow and deliberate. He didn't seem to be in a hurry, browsing for a minute or two before turning and walking out without a word, climbing into his car, a beat-up sedan, and driving off into the night. I shrugged it off, figuring he didn't find what he needed, and returned to my work, the incident fading from my mind as quickly as it had happened. 30 minutes later, I caught a glimpse of headlights pulling into the parking lot, their beams slicing through the rain. I glanced up, my stomach twisting as I recognized the same sedan from earlier. Why is he back? The man stepped out, his silhouette unmistakable, and walked straight into the store, this time heading directly to the counter. Before I could even close my laptop, "Restroom?" he asked, his voice gruff, his eyes avoiding mine. I blinked, caught off guard by the question. Yeah, it's over there," I said, pointing to the single-occupancy restroom near the back of the store. He nodded and walked over, disappearing inside, the door shutting behind him with a dull thud. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Why come back just to use the restroom? There had to be closer places unless he'd been lingering nearby the whole time, waiting for a reason to return. I tried to focus on my schoolwork, but my eyes kept darting to the restroom door, the minutes ticking by with an agonizing slowness. 5 minutes passed, then 10, and still he didn't emerge. I told myself it wasn't my place to check on him. I didn't want to be that guy, the one who knocks and makes things awkward. But as another 15 minutes dragged on, a creeping unease settled in my chest. He'd been in there for nearly 25 minutes, far longer than anyone should need, and the store's silence felt heavier now, like it was holding a secret I wasn't ready to uncover. Just as I was debating what to do, a police cruiser rolled into the parking lot, its lights off but its presence unmistakable. The officer circled the lot slowly, pausing behind the man's sedan, his gaze fixed on the vehicle as if he recognized it. My pulse quickened. He wasn't just patrolling. He was looking for something. The officer parked, stepped out, and entered the store, his expression tense, a mix of determination and worry etched into his features. "Do you know who owns that car outside?" he asked, his voice low but urgent, his eyes scanning the empty sales floor before landing on me. I swallowed hard, pointing to the restroom. "He's been in there for a while," I said, my voice unsteady. The officer's face darkened, and I knew something was terribly wrong. He strode to the restroom door and began pounding on it, his voice sharp as he demanded the man come out. There was no response, no sound at all, and after a minute of shouting, the officer turned to me. "Do you have a key?" he asked, his tone leaving no room for hesitation. I nodded, my hands trembling as I rummaged through the drawer beneath the counter, finally finding the key and hurrying over to hand it to him. He unlocked the door, his gun raised, and pushed it open. The room was empty. I stared, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. I'd watched the man go in. He hadn't come out. The officer stepped inside, his flashlight sweeping the small space, and then he looked up. The ceiling was one of those drop panel designs, the kind you can push up to access the space above, and one panel was slightly askew. He called for backup, and within 15 minutes, more officers arrived. They climbed into the ceiling, their voices echoing through the store as they searched. My heart pounded as I waited, the reality of the situation sinking in. He'd been up there the whole time, hiding, watching. They found him, dragging him down in handcuffs, his face pale and defiant, his jacket torn from the crawl space. The officers explained that he was a fugitive, wanted for horrific crimes against random innocent people earlier that night. Attacks on lone individuals, some working, some just walking home. They'd tracked him through a description of his car, and a partial license plate caught on another store's camera. I was lucky, they said, because I'd been alone, just like his other victims. Whether he was hiding from the police or planning something worse for me, I'll never know. But the thought of him lurking above me, unseen, still sends shivers down my spine. He's locked away now, but that night taught me that sometimes the quietest places hold the darkest dangers. The evening had unfolded like so many others, a familiar rhythm of monotony that I'd grown accustomed to during my regular 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. closing shift at a small drive-through cafe. It was a modest place, tucked away on a quiet street with just a handful of indoor tables, 5, maybe 6 at most, since our business thrived on the steady stream of cars at the drive-through window. But as the day waned and the later hours crept in, the cafe often became a ghost town, especially on nights like this, when a light drizzle painted the world in shades of gray. I was the only one working the closing shift, a solitary figure in a space that felt too big for just me. I'd settled into my routine, sitting at one of the dining tables with my phone propped up, Netflix playing softly to fill the silence. The glow of the screen cast faint shadows on the walls, and the hum of the refrigerator in the back was my only companion. Outside, the rain fell in a gentle rhythm, keeping customers away, which suited me just fine. By 7 p.m., not a single person had come through for 2 hours, leaving me in a bubble of solitude that felt both comforting and isolating. I was lost in the show, the plot pulling me deeper, when the front door opened, shattering the stillness, like a stone through glass. The suddenness of it jolted me, my heart lurching as I realized no one ever came inside this late. I looked up, expecting to see a hurried customer seeking shelter from the rain, but instead, I saw him, a tall man, his frame looming in the doorway, dressed in dark clothing that seemed to absorb the dim light of the cafe. He didn't acknowledge me, didn't even glance my way as he crossed the room and sat at a table on the far end, his back to me. Something about him felt wrong, a quiet menace that seeped into the air. His clothes were soaked, water dripping from his sleeves and pooling on the floor beneath him, though the drizzle outside was far too light to justify such a state. I frowned, my mind racing with questions. No cars had pulled into the lot. How had he gotten here? Had he walked through the rain, and if so, why? The unease settled in my chest, a heavy weight that made the cafe feel smaller, more confining. I stood, my chair scraping softly against the tile, and approached his table, forcing a smile as I greeted him. "Hey, what can I get for you?" My voice sounded hollow in the empty space, but he didn't respond, didn't even turn to look at me. He just sat there, his posture rigid, his face a blank mask of indifference. I waited, the seconds stretching into an eternity, before trying again. "Sir, can I help you with anything?" This time he spoke, cutting me off mid-sentence, his voice low and flat. "Who else is working tonight?" The question caught me off guard, a sliver of nervousness threading through me. Why did he need to know that? I hesitated, my instincts screaming to lie, but the words slipped out before I could stop them. "It's just me, but we close in an hour." He nodded almost imperceptibly and then said, "A small coffee." Relieved to have a task, I turned and headed to the kitchen, my hands trembling slightly as I grabbed a cup and poured the coffee, the steam rising in faint wisps. But as I turned to bring it back, I froze. He was standing in the doorway to the kitchen, his bloodshot eyes staring right at me, his face devoid of any emotion, a void that chilled me to my core. It made me really uneasy, I whispered to myself, my voice barely audible over the hum of the fridge. "Do you need something else?" I asked, hoping to break the tension, but he didn't answer. His gaze bore into me, those red-rimmed eyes unblinking, and then he spoke again, his voice a command that left no room for refusal. "Put the drink down and come with me." The words sent a jolt of fear through me, my mind racing for a way out. But he was massive, his frame dwarfing mine, and I knew I had no choice. I set the cup on the counter, my movements slow and deliberate, searching for an escape as I followed him out of the kitchen. He moved with purpose, leading me through the cafe and out the front door, the drizzle cold against my skin as we stepped into the night. Then without warning, he grabbed the back of my collar, his grip iron tight, and pushed me across the parking lot toward the road. On the other side of that empty street lay a dense wooded area, a black expanse with no buildings, no houses, just trees stretching into the darkness as far as I could see. That's where he was taking me, a place where no one would hear me scream, where no one would find me. My heart pounded, terror clawing at my throat, but just as we reached the edge of the road, a single car rolled past, its headlights cutting through the rain. The man stopped, forcing me to halt, and we both stared as the car slowed. It was a police officer, his eyes meeting mine through the window, a lifeline in the storm. I didn't hesitate. I screamed, my voice raw with desperation, and the man released me, sprinting across the road and disappearing into the woods, the darkness swallowing him whole. The officer pulled into the lot, his face a mix of concern and urgency as he stepped out to check on me. He called for backup, his radio crackling in the quiet, and I stood there, shivering in the rain, trying to process what had just happened. The officer told me he wasn't even on duty. He'd been heading home for the night, a stroke of luck that had saved my life. If he'd been just 30 seconds earlier or later, I would have been dragged into those woods, unseen, unheard, and likely lost forever. The cafe's cameras had captured decent footage of the man, his tall frame and dark clothing unmistakable, but despite the evidence, the police couldn't find him. He'd vanished into the night, leaving behind only the echo of my fear. I stayed away from the cafe for a while after that, the memory of his bloodshot eyes haunting my dreams. I'll share an update if anything new comes to light, but for now, I can only hope he never returns, that the rain doesn't bring him back to finish what he started. At 18, I was on the cusp of a new chapter, driving from my small hometown to my college 600 miles away. It was my first solo road trip, my cheap SUV packed with everything I owned, the back seat a mess of boxes and bags. Leaving my family, for the first time, weighed heavy on my chest, a mix of excitement and dread that kept my hands tight on the wheel. That night, I drove into a darkness that held more than shadows. It held a trap I'd never see coming. I'd planned the trip, over 2 days, the map app estimating I'd reach my hotel by 11 p.m. But delays, traffic, a late dinner, a slow gas stop, pushed me later into the night. By 7 p.m., the sun had vanished, leaving the highway a lonely stretch of asphalt under a starless sky. Other cars were rare, their headlights flickering past like ghosts before fading into the distance. The emptiness was suffocating, the road stretching on forever, a ribbon of black that made my eyes heavy. I fought the boredom, the fatigue, singing along to a staticky radio to stay awake. Around 10 p.m., with the final stretch ahead, I decided to stop at the next gas station, needing fuel for both my car and my waning energy. 10 minutes later, I exited the highway, pulling into a desolate gas station that seemed to exist in its own pocket of nowhere. No town, no houses, just a few pumps and a tiny convenience store, its neon sign flickering like a dying heartbeat. The lot was empty, the road silent, not a single light in the distance to suggest life beyond this lonely outpost. Felt like the edge of the world, a place where time had stopped and the night ruled unchallenged. I parked at a pump, the cold air biting as I stepped out, the scent of gasoline sharp in my nose. As I started filling the tank, a figure emerged, from the shadows startling me so badly I nearly dropped the nozzle. He was older, maybe in his 50s, his clothes tattered, his face weathered like old leather. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, but his smile was thin, forced, doing little to ease the tension knotting my gut. "Do you need something?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended, hoping he'd keep his distance. He stopped a few feet away, his eyes darting around as if searching for something or someone in the dark. "Take the exit back onto the highway," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. I blinked, confused, not sure I'd heard him right. He pointed to the ramp I'd come from, repeating himself with an urgency that sent a chill down my spine. "Take the exit back onto the highway." I nodded, mumbling an "okay," but as he shuffled off to sit against the store's wall, I felt a growing unease. The ramp he pointed to was a one-way. I'd have to drive the wrong way to follow his advice, which made no sense. The entrance, ramp ahead, looked clear. No signs of construction, just an empty path back to the highway. The more I thought about it, the stranger he seemed, sitting there in the middle of nowhere, spouting nonsense. Was this a trick? A setup? I shook off the thought, got back in my car, and drove toward the entrance ramp, ignoring his warning. As I merged onto the highway, I noticed the streetlights were out, plunging the road into near total darkness. Something's wrong, I thought, slowing down, my headlights struggling to pierce the gloom. I kept my eyes on the road, my hands gripping the wheel, when a shadow flickered to my left. Before I could react, a pickup truck roared out of nowhere, screeching to a stop in front of me, blocking the way. 4 men leapt out, their faces bare, their eyes cold and lifeless, holding weapons, metal bats, machetes, knives that gleamed in the faint light. They charged toward my car, their movements swift and merciless, as if they felt nothing for what they were about to do. My heart slammed against my ribs, panic flooding my veins. I threw the car into reverse, tires squealing. As I backed away, their figures growing larger in my headlights. Then I saw them, dozens more emerging from the shadows along the road, their silhouettes a nightmare army, some even running after me as I fled. I turned the car around, flooring the gas, my breath ragged as I sped back the way I'd come, their shapes fading into the dark. I didn't stop until I was miles away, my hand still shaking as I pulled over and called 911. The line crackled, the operator's voice distant, but no one ever called back. No update, no sign they'd even investigated. It was as if the night had swallowed the whole thing, leaving me to wonder if it had even happened. Looking back, I realized the old man at the gas station had tried to warn me, to keep me from driving into that trap. I ignored him, and it nearly cost me everything. I don't know who those people were or what they planned to do, but I know I'm lucky to be alive. Months later, I heard a story from a trucker at a diner, a tale of a stretch of highway where travelers vanished, their cars found abandoned, stripped clean under broken streetlights. They say it's a hunting ground, a place where the desperate prey on the lost, and once you're in their sights, you don't get out. I don't know if it's true, but when I drive at night, I still see those emotionless eyes glinting in the dark, and I hear that old man's voice, urging me to turn back. Some warnings you only understand when it's almost too late. The The highway stretched into oblivion, its black asphalt swallowing the light, whispering that I was not alone. I, Ryan, was 18, a freshman embarking on my first solo road trip, a 600-mile trek from my hometown to college. My beat-up SUV crammed, with dorm essentials groaned under the weight of my new life. The journey was split into 2 days, and by the second night I was deep in the heart of nowhere, the world reduced to a ribbon of road and the hum of my engine. Something was out there, hunting, its presence a shadow in my mirrors. The sun had finished by 7 p.m., leaving the highway a tunnel of dark, punctuated only by my headlights' feeble glow. Cars were scarce, their taillights fading like ghosts into the distance. I was tired, my eyes heavy from 2 days of driving, the monotony of flat fields and distant trees lulling me into a daze. I'd felt this before, a month ago, on a late drive home when a car followed too closely, only to vanish at a turn. This was different though, emptier, heavier, as if the night itself was watching. My GPS promised a gas station in 30 miles, a lifeline for my sputtering engine, which had flickered its check engine light an hour ago. I pressed on, the radio static my only companion, its hiss blending with the wind's low moan. At 10:06 p.m., the engine coughed and died, my SUV coasting to a stop on the shoulder. I swore, popping the hood, but the tangle of wires and metal was a mystery to my untrained eyes. My phone showed no signal, its screen a useless glow in the dark. The highway was silent, no cars, no lights, just an endless void of fields and sky. You're stranded, the realization sank in, a cold weight in my chest. I had no choice but to wait, hoping for a passerby. The gas station was my only hope, and I stood by the road, my breath fogging in the chill, scanning the horizon for headlights. Finally, a sign loomed in my high beams, pointing to a gas station off the next exit. I limped the SUV there, its engine stuttering but holding. The station was a lonely outpost, a single pump and a dingy convenience store, its neon sign flickering like a dying star. No cars, no houses, just darkness pressing in from all sides. I pulled up, the gravel crunching under my tires, and started, fueling, the pump's hum a faint comfort. Then he appeared, a figure stepping from the shadows, his boots silent on the pavement. My heart lurched, my hand tightening on the nozzle. He was older, maybe 50, his face weathered, clothes tattered, a faint smile curling his lips. "Take the exit back onto the highway," he said, pointing to the ramp I'd come from, a one-way road. I stared, confused, his words a puzzle that didn't fit. "What?" I managed, my voice thin. He repeated, his eyes darting around, cautious. "Urgent. Take the exit back." "You can't ignore him," a voice in my head urged, an embedded command. But his suggestion made no sense. Drive the wrong way? I glanced at the exit, empty, unlit, then back at him, now sitting against the store. His gaze fixed on me. The pump clicked off and I got in, my mind racing. He's crazy, I thought, dismissing him. But unease gnawed at me, a warning I couldn't shake. I drove toward the proper exit, the one leading forward, my headlights cutting through the dark. The ramp was pitch black, the streetlights dead, a void that swallowed my beams. I slowed, my tires humming on the asphalt, my senses on edge. Something's wrong. The thought was a blade, sharp and cold. Then, from the left, a shape loomed, a pickup truck, its lights off, lurching onto the road. My breath stopped, time fracturing into chaos. 4 men spilled from its doors, their faces blank, emotionless, wielding bats, machetes, knives, their metal glinting in my headlights. They ran toward me, silent, purposeful, a pack closing in. More emerged from the shadows, dozens, their forms, blurring into the dark, a tide of menace. Panic flooded me, a sensory overload of pounding heart, acrid sweat, and the truck's looming bulk. I slammed the gear into reverse, my tires screeching, the men just feet from my windows. Their eyes were voids, their movements mechanical, as if driven by something beyond reason. I spun the wheel, lurching backward, the crowd surging, some sprinting after me, their weapons raised. "You have to escape!" The command roared in my mind, drowning out fear. I floored it, the SUV shuddering as I hit the main road, my mirrors showing only darkness, the mob fading into the night. I drove, trembling until a town's lights appeared, a gas station glowing like salvation. I pulled in, my hands shaking as I dialed 911, my voice a jumble of fear and disbelief. The operator took my statement, but no follow-up came, no report of the men, the truck, or the ambush. They didn't even check, I realized, the silence betrayal. The old man's warning echoed, his words a lifeline I'd ignored. Was he trying to save me, or was he part of it? A scout for the trap? The question gnawed, a mystery without answers. I finished the trip, but the highway haunts me. Every dark road, every flicker in my mirrors, is them, waiting. The night anchors my fear, a reminder of the warning I didn't heed, and the shadows that nearly claimed me. On a Friday night draped in the restless quiet of a college town, where the streets whispered secrets of the weekend, I set out on a DoorDash run, chasing the fleeting promise of extra cash to fuel my student life. The evening had begun like any other, my routine as predictable as the lectures I attended, delivering food around campus to cover my expenses, the hum of my car a familiar companion in the dark. The night started strong, orders flowing in steadily, each tip a small victory. But as the dinner rush faded, the app grew silent, offering only low-paying deliveries that weren't worth the gas. I drove aimlessly, the city lights fading into the distance, the streets emptying as the hours ticked by, until a new order popped up after an hour of waiting. It was 8 miles away, a 30-minute drive, the farthest I'd ever gone for a delivery. But the payout was decent, a rare gem among the night's disappointments. I accepted without hesitation, darting into the restaurant to grab the bag, the scent of fried food wafting through the air as I returned to my car, the engine's warmth a stark contrast to the chill outside. The GPS plotted my course, leading me beyond the familiar glow of campus, into a realm of bare fields and scattered farmhouses, the landscape growing more desolate with every passing mile. What awaits me at the end of this lonely road, hidden in the shadows of the night? The drive took me deep into the countryside, the houses thinning until they vanished entirely, replaced by endless fields of grass stretching into the darkness, their edges marked by the occasional silhouette of a barn or a lone tree. At the 20-minute mark, the city was a distant memory, the road flanked by crops swaying gently in the night breeze, the silence broken only by the faint hum of my tires on the pavement. The final stretch was a narrow dirt path branching off the main road, leading through a vast field, the grass whispering secrets as I drove deeper into its embrace. At the end of the path stood a small house, its silhouette barely visible against the pitch-black expanse, a single porch light casting a faint glow that did little to dispel the gloom. I parked out front, the engine still running, the warmth of the car a fragile shield against the eerie stillness that enveloped the scene. Stepping out, I grabbed the delivery bag, the cold air biting at my skin as I walked through the unkempt grass, its blades brushing against my legs with a soft, unsettling touch. The house was dark, its windows black voids, the wood weathered and peeling, the roof sagging under the weight of neglect. The only sign of life was the porch light, a solitary beacon in the darkness, but something about it felt wrong, as if the house itself was holding its breath. I climbed the creaking steps to the porch, the wood groaning beneath my weight, and knocked on the door, the sound sharp against the oppressive silence. I waited, glancing back at my car, its headlights cutting through the darkness, the field beyond a void of shadow that seemed to stretch into infinity. No response came, not even the faintest hint of movement inside, and I knocked again, my unease growing with each passing second. The house remained silent, its darkness absolute, and as I studied it closer, the decay became undeniable. The windows were clouded with grime, the walls warped by time, a faint scent of mildew hanging in the air. I began to question whether anyone could live here, the order seeming more like a cruel trick, until I noticed the porch light's casing, its cheap solar panel glinting faintly in the glow. It was an automatic light, the kind that charges by day and turns on at dusk, meaning no one had to be here to activate it. The realization hit me like a cold wave. This house was abandoned, the order a lie, a lure into the unknown. Before I could process the thought, a low hum broke the silence. A vehicle approaching down the dirt path, its headlights slicing through the darkness as it pulled up behind my car. A man stepped out, his figure shrouded in shadow, and I called out from the porch asking if this was his order. But he offered no reply, standing motionless beside his car, his silence a weight that pressed against my chest. My adrenaline surged, a primal instinct screaming that I was in danger, the stillness of the night amplifying my isolation. I was alone, trapped between an empty house and a stranger in the middle of a desolate field, with no one to hear my cries for help. In a split second, decision, I dropped the bag, the food tumbling onto the porch, and sprinted off the steps, running behind the house and into the field of tall grass beyond. I glanced back, my heart pounding as I saw the man moving toward me, his pace quickening, his intent clear in the way he pursued me through the darkness. I plunged deeper into the field, the grass growing thicker, taller, its blades scratching at my skin as they obscured my view, hiding me from the world. My breath came in ragged gasps, my legs burning as I pushed forward, the man's presence a looming threat behind me. But the dense grass became my ally, shielding me from his sight. I slowed, my chest heaving, moving carefully to avoid detection, the rustle of the grass the only sound in the night as I waited, listening for any sign of him. After what felt like an eternity, I reached the edge of the field, stumbling into the yard of another house, its lights a distant promise of safety. From there, I made my way to a road, my phone finally catching a signal, and called for help, the police arriving to escort me back to my car. The man was gone by the time we returned, vanished into the night like a ghost. But what struck me was the state of my car. It hadn't been touched. The bag of food still on the porch, untouched and abandoned. He hadn't come for the food, nor to steal my car. His intentions were far darker, a purpose that chills me to the core. The police confirmed the house was indeed abandoned, a hollow shell in the middle of nowhere, and I was left with the haunting realization of how close I'd come to something far worse than theft. The memory of that night lingers, a specter that haunts my every delivery, a reminder of the unseen dangers that lurk in the quiet corners of the world, waiting for the unwary to stumble into their grasp. A couple of years ago, I took a temporary job at a small gas station on the outskirts of my town, knowing I'd be moving in 6 months and couldn't commit to anything long-term. I needed the money, though, and the pay was decent enough to draw me in, especially for the overnight shift they needed filled. My role was simple: stay by the register, ring up the occasional customer, and handle basic maintenance like restocking shelves or cleaning the pumps. The station was a quiet place at night, its fluorescent lights casting a sterile glow over the empty parking lot, the hum of the refrigerator units the only sound breaking the stillness. I'd been working there for 4 months, settling into the routine, when I started noticing a regular customer who came in almost every night, always between 1 and 2 a.m. He was a man in his early 40s, with a weathered face and tired eyes, driving an old red Chevy sedan that had seen better days. He introduced himself once as Mark, though I'd come to think of him as a bit of an enigma. He'd buy the strangest assortment of things, sometimes a bag of chips or a soda, other times random items like duct tape, batteries, or a small screwdriver. I always found it odd. Why come to a gas station every night for things you could get cheaper at a grocery store? He wasn't much for conversation, always keeping his interactions short, his voice low and clipped. But over time, I grew used to his presence, a familiar face in the lonely hours of my shift. One night around 1 a.m., the station was empty, the air heavy with the kind of silence that feels alive, watching you from the shadows. I was sitting in the corner scrolling through my phone to pass the time, when Mark's red Chevy pulled into the lot, its headlights cutting through the dark. He stepped out, moving faster than usual, and when he entered the store, I could see something was different. He was drenched in sweat, his shirt clinging to his skin, his movements frantic as he darted through the aisles. My stomach tightened. He looked like a man on edge, searching for something with a desperate intensity. He finally grabbed a master lock, the kind you'd use for a bicycle, and rushed to the counter, tossing it down with a trembling hand. I tried to keep my voice steady, forcing a smile. "Good to see you again, Mark. Just get a new bike?" I asked, hoping to ease the tension, but he didn't even glance at me. His hands fumbled with his wallet, pulling out crumpled bills in a hurry, his breathing uneven. I rang him up, my unease growing, and watched as he bolted back to his car, speeding off into the night. Something was wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he'd been biking late, got caught in a sudden panic about theft, and needed a lock to secure his ride. It felt like a stretch, but it was the best I could come up with to calm my nerves. The rest of that night passed uneventfully, the station returning to its usual quiet, but Mark didn't show up again for nearly a week, a break from his routine that left me on edge. He'd been so consistent, his absence felt like a warning, a shadow lingering just out of sight. It wasn't until my Wednesday shift, a drizzly night that kept the station even quieter than usual, that I saw him again. I was leaning back in my chair, staring out the window at the rain streaking down the glass, the parking lot a blur of wet asphalt under the streetlights, when his red Chevy rolled in, its engine cutting through the stillness. He parked and hurried. Inside, his movements sharp, almost aggressive. I greeted him as he entered, but he ignored me, his eyes darting around the aisles as he muttered under his breath, his voice low and frustrated, the words too faint for me to catch. My gut twisted, a primal instinct telling me something was terribly wrong. Then a sound jolted me, a heavy thud, sharp and unmistakable, coming from outside. My eyes snapped to the window, landing on Mark's car, the only thing out there in the rain-soaked lot. It sounded like someone had kicked the inside of the door hard. My heart raced as I turned back to Mark, and that's when I saw it. He was standing in the aisle, staring at me, his gaze cold and unblinking, as if I'd just uncovered a secret I was never meant to know. Another thud echoed from the car, and panic surged through me, my body trembling as I realized what might be happening. Mark's expression shifted, a flicker of something dangerous in his eyes, and then he turned, bolting out the door and into his car. I stood frozen for a moment, my mind reeling before I snapped into action, grabbing my phone and snapping a quick photo of his license plate as he sped away. My hands shook as I dialed 911, my voice barely steady as I explained what I'd seen, the thud still echoing in my mind like a drumbeat of dread. The rest of that night stretched on endlessly, each minute heavy with fear as I waited for any word from the police, my eyes darting to the windows, half expecting him to return. It wasn't until I got home at 6 a.m., exhausted and on edge, that my phone finally rang. The officer on the line sounded grim but relieved. They'd tracked Mark down using the license plate I'd provided. They found a woman in his car, bound and terrified, a victim of his recent kidnapping. He'd just moved into a small cabin on the edge of town, a place with no prior address on record, making it impossible for them to have known what he'd been up to until now. The woman was safe, rescued before he could harm her. But the revelation hit me like a punch. Mark wasn't even his real name, a detail that didn't surprise me. But what did was how close I'd come to danger without knowing it. He's locked, away now, but the memory of that night, of those thuds, of his cold stare, still haunts me. A reminder that sometimes the people we think we know are hiding the darkest secrets. It was just a few months ago, a night I'd taken on as a last-minute gig to make some extra cash with DoorDash. I didn't do this often, maybe 10 to 15 hours a week, squeezing in deliveries between my day job and sleep. That night, I'd only planned to handle a couple of orders, the late hour already weighing on my tired eyes. But around 1 a.m., a small order popped up on my app, a simple drop-off to a business building across town. The address was clear, and I'd done similar runs before. Overnight workers often ordered food to keep them going through the graveyard shift. It seemed routine, nothing out of the ordinary. So I accepted the job and headed out into the night. The streets were quiet, the city wrapped in a late-night hush, with only the occasional flicker of a streetlight to break the monotony. I pulled into the parking lot of the building, my headlights sweeping across the empty asphalt, and a faint unease settled in my chest. There wasn't a single car in sight, no signs of life, no hint of the workers I'd expected to find. I parked near the front entrance, grabbed the food bag, and stepped out, the cool night air brushing against my skin as I approached the building. The structure was unmistakably an office building, but smaller than most I'd seen. Just 2 stories, high and narrow, its facade unremarkable under the dim glow of a single light behind the front door. Every window was dark, the kind of darkness that felt heavy, oppressive, as if the building itself was holding its breath. I checked the app for the drop-off instructions. Enter the main hallway and leave the bag outside room 232. It was a specific request, one I'd only encountered at hotels, not office buildings, and it struck me as odd. I peered through the glass door, seeing a hallway lined with closed doors on either side, their numbers barely visible in the faint light. Curiosity nudged me forward, but a flicker of doubt lingered in my mind. I tested the door, expecting it to be locked, but it opened easily, the hinges silent as I stepped inside. The air was stale, thick with the scent of dust and neglect, and the only sound was the low hum of the overhead lights, their fluorescent glow casting harsh shadows on the walls. I'd expected to hear signs of life, typing, footsteps, muffled voices, but there was nothing, not a single sound to break the eerie stillness. This wasn't an office at work. It was a tomb, waiting for something to disturb its sleep. I walked past the first few doors, their numbers in the 100s, 102, 106, meaning room 232 had to be on the second floor. In the middle of the hallway, a doorway led to a staircase, propped open with a wedge on the floor, but the stairwell beyond was pitch black, a void that seemed to swallow the light from the hall. I stepped up to the bottom of the stairs, peering up into the darkness, and felt a chill run down my spine. Not a single ray of light came from above, not even a hint of where room 232 might be. The silence pressed against me, heavier now, and I realized I couldn't do this. I'd always followed instructions to the letter, chasing good reviews, but this was different. This was too unsettling, too wrong. I turned back, stepping out of the stairwell and into the hallway, my heart beating faster with every step. That's when it happened. The door right across from me opened, revealing a room as dark as the stairwell, and a man stepped out, his silhouette stark against the faint light of the hall. He didn't look like an office worker, not in his street clothes, not with the way he stood, rigid and unyielding, as if he'd been waiting for me all along. He pointed past me toward the stairwell and said in a low, controlled voice, "232 is up there." I nodded, but I couldn't move, my feet rooted to the floor as his eyes locked onto mine. There was something in his gaze, a suppressed anger, that simmered just beneath the surface, a storm waiting to break. The air between us grew thick, charged with a tension I couldn't name, and after a few agonizing seconds, I dropped the bag on the ground, its contents spilling slightly as I turned and walked quickly toward the exit. I didn't dare look back, but I heard his footsteps, deliberate, heavy, moving into the stairwell and climbing the stairs as I fled the building. I jumped into my car, my hands trembling as I started the engine and drove away, the empty parking lot fading into the night behind me. I didn't know what I'd just escaped, or if I was overreacting so I didn't call the police. I just wanted to forget it, to pretend it had never happened. But the next day, my phone rang, and the voice on the other end was a police officer, his tone serious as he explained why he was calling. The office had reported a break-in, and the CCTV footage had captured my car and license plate, tracing it back to me. They'd also seen the break-in itself, and they needed to question me to see if I had any information that could help. I didn't have much to offer, just the memory of that man, his angry eyes, and the darkness of the stairwell. But what they told me sent a shiver through my entire body. There hadn't been just one man. There were three, and the other two had been hiding at the top of the stairs, waiting for me to climb up. The cameras had caught them, lurking in the shadows, ready to strike if I'd followed the instructions, to room 232. Disturbingly, I wasn't the only target that night. Several other delivery orders had been placed to the same office, a calculated trap to lure drivers in. The other drivers had been smarter, leaving their orders outside the front door, but I'd walked right into the heart of their plan. The police couldn't say what would have happened if I'd gone up to the second floor, what horrors those men had intended, but the thought of it, of what I'd narrowly escaped, haunts me still. I hope they find those three men, that they stop them before anyone else falls victim to their scheme, because the darkness upstairs is a place I never want to imagine again. I was a 16-year-old high school student, 2 weeks into the school year, seeking a break from the stress of classes and exams. It was a Saturday evening, August 24th, and I found myself alone in our suburban house, a cozy 2-story nestled at the edge of a quiet neighborhood. My mom and sister were out shopping, my dad was stuck at work, and I was left to my own devices, the hum of the house my only company. That night, the walls that held me safe would become a cage, hiding something I was never meant to see. I decided to unwind by inviting my friends, whom I'll call Max and Leo, to play Fortnite online. It was around 8 p.m. when we finally logged, delayed by my failed attempt at making pizza rolls. The batch I'd prepared turned to charcoal in the oven, filling the kitchen with a bitter, smoky scent. We played a few rounds, laughter echoing through my headset, But Max and Leo grew frustrated after a string of losses, signing off after just an hour. The house fell silent again, the kind of stillness that feels too heavy, too aware. I planned to scroll on my phone and drift off to sleep, the glow of the screen a small comfort in the darkened room. But something else had plans for me, something that had already crossed the threshold. I was about to settle into bed when a sound jolted me upright. My two dogs, curled up in the backyard, began to bark, their voices sharp and urgent. It wasn't unusual for them to react to passers-by on the street, but the intensity in their tone sent a prickle of unease down my spine. I crossed to the window, parting the curtains to peer into the night. The backyard was a sea of shadows. The street, beyond empty under the faint glow of a street lamp. No one was there, or so I thought. I stepped back, ready to dismiss it as a stray cat or a gust of wind, when a new sound stopped me cold. The garage door, its heavy frame unmistakable, groaned as it lifted and then settled back into place. My heart skipped a beat. That sound meant my dad was home, but his van wasn't in the driveway, and he'd texted earlier saying he'd be working late. A chill settled over me, the kind that sinks into your bones and whispers danger. I hurried downstairs to the dining room, the hardwood floor cold beneath my socks, and pressed my face to the window for a better view. The driveway stretched out before me, empty and still, not a soul or vehicle in sight. If no one was home, then who or what had opened the garage? My pulse quickened, but I wasn't the type to play hero. I bolted back upstairs, my breath shallow, and sent a frantic message to our family group chat, asking if anyone was home. My mom replied quickly, her words a lifeline in the dark. "Turn off the lights, lock your bedroom door, and stay there until I get back." I obeyed, plunging my room into darkness, the lock clicking into place with a sound that felt too fragile against the unknown. 15 minutes passed, each second stretching into eternity, the silence growing heavier, more oppressive. I sat on my bed, clutching a pillow, my ears straining for any sound. Then I heard it, a faint groan from the wooden floor downstairs, as if someone were moving carefully, deliberately, trying not to be heard. My stomach twisted, fear coiling tight around my chest. I didn't have a weapon, but desperation drove me to unclip the boom arm from my desk's microphone, its metal cold in my sweaty grip. I eased the bedroom door open, the hinges silent, and stepped onto the upstairs balcony that overlooked the living room. The house was a maze of shadows below, the faint glow of a street lamp filtering through the windows. "Is anyone there?" I called, my voice trembling, immediately regretting the words. No one would answer, not unless they wanted to be found. For the moment, there was nothing, and I dared to hope I'd imagined it all. Then I saw him, a large silhouette, standing directly beneath the balcony, his shape a black void against the dim light. Panic surged through me, electric and raw, and I stumbled back, my breath hitching. He must have known I'd seen him, because the floor below erupted with the sound of footsteps, heavy, fast, racing up the stairs toward me. I turned and ran, diving into the nearest room with a door, my small bathroom, and locked myself inside. My heart pounding so loudly I thought he'd hear it. I'd left my phone in the bedroom, my lifeline just out of reach. The footsteps stopped outside the bathroom, the silence that followed more terrifying than the sound. I waited, holding my breath, every muscle tensed until I couldn't stand it any longer. Summoning every ounce of courage, I darted out, grabbed my phone from the bedroom, and locked the door behind me, my hands shaking as I barricaded myself. In across the hall, my sister's room stood open, a gaping maw of darkness, and I knew he must be there, hiding, waiting. I fumbled with my phone, typing 911, my thumb hovering over the call button, when I noticed the storage closet in the wall, its door ajar, just a sliver. Through the crack, a single dark brown eye stared back at me, unblinking, piercing my soul, with a malice I could feel in my bones. The terror that gripped me in that moment was unlike anything I'd ever known, a primal fear that stripped away all thought. I dropped the phone, the screen clattering against the floor, and ran, tearing down the stairs and out the front door, the night air biting at my skin as I sprinted up the hill to my neighbor's house. He was a police officer, a gruff but kind man, and I pounded on his door, gasping out my story as his wife pulled me inside, her arms a shaky comfort. My neighbor grabbed his gear and called for backup, heading down to my house with a flashlight and a steady hand. I stayed with his wife, my eyes locked on the street, waiting for the worst. Minutes later, I followed, unable to stay away, and when I stepped back into my house, I saw him, a tall, gaunt man with a gray beard, his black coat filthy, being forced to the ground by my neighbor, handcuffs glinting as they snapped around his wrists. He didn't struggle, didn't speak, but his presence lingered, a shadow I couldn't shake. My family returned soon after, their relief palpable as they held me close, grateful I was unharmed. They thanked my neighbor for his bravery, and we installed better security. Cameras, new locks, a system to keep the darkness at bay. I'm not allowed to be home alone anymore. The memory of that night too raw, too real. I don't wish this on anyone, not even my worst enemy. Years later, I heard a whisper from a friend who'd lived in the neighborhood longer than I had. Decades ago, a man matching the intruder's description had haunted these streets, breaking into homes, watching families as they slept, never stealing, only staring. They caught him once, but he escaped, vanishing into the night, until he came back for me. I don't know if it's true, but when I'm alone, I still hear those footsteps racing up the stairs, and I see that eye peering through the wall, waiting for me to look back. Some fears never leave you, no matter how many locks you turn. The grocery store was a fortress of light in the midnight dark, but its windows betrayed me, framing a shadow that hungered to get in. I, Nathan, was the night manager, a lone sentinel in a mid-sized store on the city's edge. My shifts were marathons, 10 hours of restocking shelves and balancing books, made harder by a skeleton crew. Tonight I was alone, the only soul in a sea of canned goods and fluorescent glow. The store was closed, its doors locked, but the night outside pressed against the glass, heavy with secrets. Something was watching, its gaze a cold blade on my skin. The store was a labyrinth of aisles, its shelves towering with boxes and jars, the air thick with the scent of cardboard and cleaning fluid. I moved through my tasks with mechanical precision, hauling crates, stacking cans, the rhythm of full work drowning out the silence. The overhead lights buzzed, casting stark shadows that danced as I passed. It was 2 a.m. and I'd been at it for hours, my muscles aching, my mind dulled by repetition. I'd felt this before, a week ago, when a man lingered in the lot after closing, his silhouette fading when I checked again. Tonight was different, though. The silence was too deep, too deliberate, as if the store was holding its breath. Then it came, a sharp tap against the window, like a finger testing my world. I froze, a box of cereal slipping from my hands, its contents rattling softly. The sound echoed deliberate, coming from the front of the store. My heart stuttered, my eyes darting to the windows, their glass reflecting the store's harsh light. "You can't look away," a voice in my head urged, an embedded command pulling me forward. I set the box down, my boots scuffing the linoleum, and moved toward the entrance, the tap repeating, insistent. A summons from the dark. Outside, a man stood, his face pressed to the glass, his eyes locked on me. He was disheveled, his coat tattered, his stare unblinking like a predator sizing its prey. "What do you want?" I called, my voice steady despite the chill in my veins. He didn't flinch, his lips parting in a flat demand. "Open the door." His voice was low, devoid of warmth, each word a stone. I shook my head, stepping back. "We're closed. You can't be here." His eyes narrowed, a flicker of rage crossing his face, but I held my ground, pulling my phone out, my thumb hovering over 911. "I'll call the cops," I warned, raising the phone. Only then did he move, stepping away, his silhouette melting into the parking lot's shadows. "He's gone," I told myself, but the air felt heavier, the store's light dimmer, as if he'd left something behind. I returned to my work, stacking boxes with trembling hands, the tap still echoing in my mind. The store felt smaller, its aisles closing in, each shadow a hiding place. He'll come back, the thought was a splinter, sharp and persistent. I focused on the shelves, the cans, anything to drown out the fear. Then it happened again, a metallic snap like a bone breaking, reverberating through the store. My breath caught, my body rigid. The sound came from the entrance, a violation of the silence that sent my pulse racing. I ran to the front, my boots pounding, and stopped dead. The revolving door's bolt lock was gone, its metal frame shattered, the glass gaping open, inviting the night inside. My world tilted, fear flooding me like ice. I turned, and there he was. The man, inches away, his eyes blazing with fury. His coat hung loose, his hands clenched, his presence a storm of menace. He's inside. The realization was a sensory overload. The cold air from the open door biting my skin. The store's buzz a deafening roar. I bolted, my legs moving before my mind could catch up, darting through the aisles toward the exit. His footsteps thundered behind me, heavy, relentless, closing the gap. I burst through the revolving door, the night swallowing me, the parking, lot of black expanse under weak streetlights. Then I saw it, a van, its engine roaring, speeding toward me. Its headlights blinded me, its tires screeching as it swerved, missing me by inches. I stumbled, my heart a drumbeat, and kept running, my car a distant beacon. The man's steps faltered, and I risked a glance back. He was gone. The van peeling out of the lot, its taillights fading into the dark. They were together. The thought was a knife twisting in my gut. I reached my car, fumbling with the keys, and locked myself in, my hands shaking as I dialed 911. My voice was a jumble, recounting the man, the lock, the van, as I watched the empty lot, half expecting them to return. Police arrived, their lights cutting through the night, and combed the store. The cameras showed him, his face, his coat, breaking the lock with a tool, his eyes scanning for me. The van was there, waiting, its driver a shadow. They'd planned to take me, to drag me into that vehicle for reasons they never confessed. They were hunting, the officer said, his words a weight I couldn't shake. The man in the van vanished, no trace, no motive, just a void where answers should have been. I still manage the store, but the nights are different now. Every shadow, every flicker in the windows is him, waiting. The glass no longer feels like a shield, it's a lens, framing my fear. The light anchors my dread, a reminder of the face that broke my world and the van that nearly stole me away. On a stormy night where the rain fell like a shroud over the endless highways, I drove my truck across the country, a veteran of the road with 20 years of solitude etched into my bones, unaware of the danger lurking in the tempest's embrace. The route from the East Coast to the far west was one I'd traveled countless times, a familiar ribbon of asphalt that stretched through the heart of America, each mile marked by the same truck stops, the same diners, the same lonely stretches of nothingness. For 2 decades, I'd hauled loads through these paths, the hum of the engine a constant companion, the rhythm of the journey as predictable as the sunrise. Nothing strange had ever happened, not truly, though there had been odd moments, fleeting shadows that never amounted to more than a passing thought. So, as I embarked on this trip, 20 hours into the drive, I carried no worries, the weight of routine a comforting shield against the unknown. But as the night deepened, a storm rolled in, its dark clouds swallowing the stars, the rain lashing against the windshield with a ferocity that slowed my progress. It was late, the hour creeping toward midnight, and exhaustion tugged at my edges, urging me to find the next truck stop where I could rest. The promise of sleep a beacon in the chaos of the storm. What unseen threats ride the winds of this tempest, waiting to shatter the illusion of safety? I pressed on, the road stretching flat and straight before me, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the desolate landscape, the rain blurring the edges of my vision. Then, without warning, a blinding light pierced the darkness behind me, its sudden appearance a jolt that sent my heart racing. The road had been empty. I would have seen any vehicle approaching in my mirrors. But now, this car was right behind me, its headlights glaring, its presence an intrusion in the storm's fury. I kept my eyes on the mirrors, my grip tightening on the wheel, but the car drew closer, so close that the trailer obscured it entirely, its lights reflecting off the metal in a ghostly glow. Then, just as suddenly, the lights vanished, plunging the road back into darkness, leaving me to question whether they were still there, trailing me in the shadows. The act was reckless, insane even, to turn off headlights in the middle of a heavy storm, and to tail me so closely felt like a predator stalking its prey. My mind raced with possibilities, the specter of a robbery looming large, a fear every trucker knows when alone on the road at night. A sign ahead offered a lifeline, a truck stop just 5 miles away, a haven where I could escape whatever this was. I maintained my speed, my eyes darting to the mirrors, but the rain and darkness made it impossible to know if they followed, the uncertainty gnawing at my nerves. As the miles ticked by, I saw no further signs of them, and by the time I reached the truck stop, my fear had begun to ebb, the promise of safety drawing nearer. I pulled into the truck stop, the lot mostly empty save for a few rigs at the gas pumps, their drivers likely seeking shelter from the storm. I parked in the middle of the lot, the rain pelting the truck's metal roof, its rhythm a steady drumbeat that drowned out the world outside. I checked my mirrors one last time, searching for any sign of the car, but the darkness and the rain obscured everything beyond the faint glow of the lot's lights. After a moment of organizing my things, I opened the door, leaning out into the downpour, the cold water soaking me in seconds as I scanned the side of the trailer. There was no car, no headlights, just the empty lot stretching into the shadows, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me, the tension in my shoulders easing. I settled back into the cab, grabbing my pillow and blanket from the passenger seat, the warmth of the truck a fragile comfort against the storm's fury. I locked the doors, turned off the engine, and let the sound of the rain lull me into a restless sleep, the exhaustion of the long drive pulling me under, the world outside fading into a distant hum as I drifted into oblivion. But my respite was short-lived. A violent jolt rocked the truck, a force so sudden it tore me from sleep, my eyes snapping open as the cab shuddered around me. I sat up, my heart pounding, the storm still raging outside, its intensity unchanged, if not worsened, by the hours. I'd been asleep, I reached for the door handle, my hands trembling as I opened it, peering out into the rain. The darkness so thick I could barely make out the outline of a car parked behind my trailer, its headlights off, its presence a silent menace. Two men moved in front of it, their figures blurred by the downpour, their intentions unclear but unmistakably threatening. Fear gripped me, a primal terror that froze me in place, and as I hesitated, torn between confronting them and staying, a third man appeared at my door, his sudden presence a shock that sent a wave of panic through me. He pushed against the door with brutal force, pinning me back into the driver's seat, his voice sharp as he ordered me to stay where I was, his right hand buried in his hoodie, a gesture that screamed of hidden danger, a weapon perhaps ready to be drawn. The two men behind the truck closed in, their eyes fixed on me through the rain, their stares unrelenting, a silent promise of violence if I dared to move. I sat frozen, the truck trembling beneath me, the man at my door watching, my every breath, his gaze a weight that pinned me in place, the minutes stretching into an eternity of dread. Then, as suddenly as they'd appeared, they turned and fled, running back to their car and disappearing into the storm, their taillights fading into the night as I sat in stunned silence. I called the police, my voice shaking as I reported the incident, but the storm had washed away any chance of tracking them, and no information ever surfaced about who they were or what they wanted. What would have happened if I'd tried to drive away the moment I saw them? If I'd been less aware of the danger lurking in the rain? I escaped because I stayed still, because I didn't provoke them. But the memory of that night haunts me still, a chilling reminder of how close I came to a fate I'll never fully understand, a shadow that follows me on every lonely road I travel. It was the summer of 2016, and I was driving across the country to visit my parents who had just settled on the West Coast. The journey was a long one, stretching over desolate highways where the landscape blurred into an endless expanse of flat, empty land, broken only by the occasional gas station glowing like a beacon in the darkness. I'd split the trip into 2 days, but by the second night I was still hours from my destination, the clock ticking past midnight as I pushed my old sedan through the lonely stretch of road. The highway was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that presses against you, making every shadow seem alive, every flicker of movement a threat. I'd been driving for hours, my eyes heavy with fatigue when a warning light on my dashboard blinked to life. The check engine light, glowing in ominous orange. I wasn't surprised, not really. My car was a relic, a hand-me-down from my college years. Its engine a patchwork of repairs that had kept it limping along far past its prime. I wasn't a car person, though, and the light might as well have been written in a foreign language. I had no idea what was wrong or how to fix it. I pulled out my phone, hoping to find a solution, and searched for the nearest gas station. The map showed 130 miles away, a daunting distance in the middle of nowhere. But I had no choice but to try. Fate, it seemed, had other plans. Before I could even make it another mile, the engine sputtered, a weak cough that turned into silence, and my car rolled to a stop on the side of the highway, the momentum fading until I was left stranded in the dark. I tried everything I could think of to get it running again, turning the key over and over, each attempt more desperate than the last, until the battery started to weaken. I popped the hood, stepping out into the cool night air, the highway stretching endlessly in both directions, not a single car in sight. I peered at the engine, my flashlight casting shaky beams across the tangle of metal, but I saw nothing I could fix, no obvious problem to solve. This was it, the end of the line for my car. I returned to the driver's seat, the reality of my situation sinking in, and pulled out my phone again, hoping for a miracle. My stomach dropped. No service, not even a single bar. I tried calling anyway, dialing 911 in a futile attempt to reach someone, anyone. But the calls wouldn't go through, each failed attempt tightening the knot of panic in my chest. For 30 minutes I sat there weighing my options, the darkness pressing in around me. I couldn't walk 30 miles in the middle of the night, not on a highway this remote, and staying in the car felt like waiting for trouble to find me. There was only one choice left. Hitchhiking, something I'd never done before, something I'd always thought I'd never need to do. The idea made me nervous, a mix of fear and uncertainty swirling in my gut, but I had no other way out. I stepped out onto the side of the road, the gravel crunching under my shoes, and stuck out my thumb, hoping for a kind stranger to take pity on me. Hours passed, the night growing colder, each set of headlights a fleeting hope that faded as car after car sped by without stopping. It was probably 2 or 3 a.m. when I finally saw another vehicle approaching, its headlights slicing through the darkness like a lifeline. I raised my thumb again, expecting it to pass like the others, but to my surprise it slowed, pulling over onto the shoulder just ahead of me. It was a black pickup truck, its paint chipped and faded, the kind of vehicle that looked like it had lived a hard life. I approached cautiously, unable to see the driver until I reached the side of the truck. He rolled down the window, revealing a skinny man with a long, thin face, his black hair hanging past his shoulders, framing a smile that was too wide, too eager. "Need a lift?" he asked, his voice bright, almost cheerful. But there was something unsettling about him, a glint in his eyes that made my skin crawl. I hesitated, my instincts screaming at me to walk away, but I was exhausted, stranded, and this might be my only chance to get help. Against my better judgment, I nodded, climbing into the back seat, the door creaking as I shut it behind me. The interior of the truck smelled faintly of oil and stale cigarettes, the seats worn and stained, a clutter of empty soda cans on the floor. I tried to make small talk, hoping to ease the tension that coiled in my chest. "So, what brings you out here this late?" I asked, my voice sounding forced even to my own ears. "Just cruising on the highway," he replied, that same unsettling grin plastered on his face, as if driving aimlessly in the middle of nowhere at 3 a.m. was the most natural thing in the world. His answer struck me as odd. We were miles from anything. No towns, no lights, just endless road. I expected him to ask why I needed a ride, but he didn't, his silence adding to the unease that was steadily growing inside me. I opened my mouth to ask another question, anything to fill the void, but he cut me off, his eyes flicking to the rearview mirror, locking onto mine. "You don't have any weapons on you, right?" he asked, his tone still light, that grin never faltering. "Just making sure I'm safe." The question hit me like a jolt, my breath catching in my throat. Why would he ask that? I forced a nervous laugh, shaking my head. "No, nothing like that," I said, my voice barely steady, but the words felt hollow, the air in the truck suddenly thick with tension. I didn't speak again after that, my eyes fixed on the window, watching the dark landscape roll by, my mind racing with questions I didn't dare ask. 10 minutes passed in suffocating silence, the hum of the engine the only sound, until he made a sudden turn off the highway onto a narrow dirt road, the truck jolting as it hit the uneven ground. I sat up, my heart pounding, the realization hitting me like a wave. This wasn't the way to any gas station. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice louder now, edged with fear. He didn't answer, just shot me a quick glance, his grin fading into something colder, more focused. I asked again, my panic rising. "Where are you taking me?" Still no response, his hands gripping the wheel as he drove deeper into the darkness. I knew then that I couldn't stay in this truck. Whatever happened next, I had to get out. I gripped the door handle, my muscles tense, ready to bolt the moment he stopped. The dirt road stretched on, the headlights revealing a small farmhouse. Ahead, its silhouette decaying and broken, the front door hanging wide open like a gaping maw. This place was abandoned, a husk of a home, and he'd brought me here on purpose. He slammed on the brakes, the truck jerking to a stop, and I lunged for the door, throwing it open as he did the same, his boots hitting the ground with a heavy thud. I sprinted toward the tree line, the darkness of the woods swallowing me as I ran, my breath ragged, my heart pounding in my ears. I heard him behind me, his footsteps heavy, closing the distance, but the forest was pitch black, the trees shielding me from his sight. I veered sharply, ducking behind a thick trunk, my lungs burning as I held my breath, listening. His footsteps slowed, then stopped, just 10 or 15 feet away. His presence a shadow I couldn't see but could feel, lurking in the dark. A minute passed, each second an eternity, and then his voice broke the silence, low and chilling, repeating the same words over and over in a monotone that sent shivers down my spine. "Come on, let's go back. I'll give you a ride. I wasn't trying to scare you." The words were hollow, a predator's lure, and the worst part was that I never heard him walk back to the truck. I had no idea where he was, if he was still out there waiting for me to make a sound. I knew I had to move, to get as far from him as I could, so I crept through the woods, my steps as silent as I could manage, heading toward what I hoped was the main road. The darkness was absolute, the trees a maze of shadows, but I kept going, my hands trembling as I pulled out my phone, turning the brightness down to a faint glow. Somehow I had service now, a single bar that felt like a lifeline. I nearly broke down in relief, dialing 911 with shaking fingers, whispering my location as they tracked the call. I made it back to the highway, my legs weak with exhaustion, and 2 officers met me there, their flashlights cutting through the dark as I explained what had happened, my voice trembling with the memory of that farmhouse, that voice. By the time they searched the area, the man and his truck were gone, vanished without a trace, as if they'd never been there at all. The farmhouse was exactly what it looked like, an abandoned shell, its walls crumbling, its windows shattered, a place that hadn't seen life in years. But he'd known exactly where it was, had driven straight to it with purpose, and that made it all the more terrifying. I'll never know what he planned to do that night, what might have happened if I hadn't run, but the thought of it still haunts me, a shadow that lingers on the edge of every lonely road I travel. It was only a few months ago, during the tail end of winter, when the last whispers of cold clung to the air, before spring's warmth could take over. I'd decided to spend the weekend indoors, cocooned in the comfort of my small house, where the chill outside couldn't reach me. That night the rain fell steadily, a soft patter against the windows, and the cold seeped through the walls, urging me to stay wrapped in a blanket on the couch. I had nothing better to do than lose myself in a movie, the flickering screen casting a warm glow across the living room, the dialogue a gentle hum that lulled me into a state of calm. Dinner had come and gone, a simple meal of leftovers that left me content, and I was ready to let the night drift away in the quiet solitude of my home. But not long after the dishes were cleared, a sharp knock at the door broke through the stillness, jarring me from my reverie. I stood, the blanket slipping from my shoulders, and crossed the room, my socks silent on the hardwood floor. Peering through the peephole, I saw a man I didn't recognize, his face shadowed by a beanie, his hands gripping a snow shovel despite the absence of snow on the ground. Why would he have a shovel in the rain? What was he really here for? The question gnawed at me, a flicker of unease sparking in my chest. I cracked the door open just an inch, the cold air slipping through the gap, and asked what he wanted. His response came too quickly, a stammered mess of words as he spun a tale about being a friendly neighbor looking for yard work. But his eyes betrayed him, darting nervously, and his story felt rehearsed, unnatural, like a script he hadn't practiced enough. I shook my head, muttering a quick, "No thanks," and began to close the door. But he reached out, his hand pressing against the wood, holding it open for a moment. His gaze locked onto mine, a silent intensity that made my stomach twist before he finally let go. I shut the door, locking it with a trembling hand, and leaned against it, my breath shallow as I processed what had just happened. I glanced out the window, watching him walk down the sidewalk, his figure fading into the rainy fog that clung to the street. I stood there for another minute, ensuring he was truly gone, before returning to my movie, trying to convince myself he was just a sketchy drifter who'd move on to the next house. The rain grew heavier over the next hour, its rhythm a constant drone against the roof, lulling me back into a false sense of security. I was still in the living room, the remnants of my first movie fading into the credits as I started another, though exhaustion tugged at my eyelids, threatening to pull me under. I knew I was too tired to finish it, my vision blurring as I drifted, and out of focus, the dialogue becoming a distant murmur. But then a sudden sound jolted me awake, a heavy thud from above, sharp and unmistakable, as if something had fallen on the roof. The noise was muffled by the rain, making it hard to gauge its intensity. But what unnerved me most was its origin. It had definitely come from upstairs, a part of the house I hadn't touched all evening. I stood, my heart beating a little faster, and climbed the stairs, the air growing colder with each step. I checked the rooms, looking for anything out of place, a fallen book, a leaking pipe, anything that might explain the sound, but found nothing. The hallway was as I'd left it, the doors to the spare rooms still closed, the ceiling showing no signs of water damage. I told myself it was probably a gutter, loosened by the heavy rain, or maybe a branch hitting the roof in the wind. It was a plausible explanation, one I clung to as I descended the stairs, the unease lingering but not strong enough to keep me from returning to my movie. Now more awake, I settled back on the couch, determined to finish the film before bed, letting the familiar rhythm of the rain soothe my frayed nerves once more. By the time the movie ended, it was nearly midnight, and I was ready to call it a night. I shut off the TV, the screen going dark with a soft hum, and began my nightly routine, turning off the lights downstairs one by one. The house felt quieter now, the rain a steady backdrop to the silence, and I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, my footsteps slow and heavy with fatigue. But as I neared the top, a sudden chill washed over me, the temperature dropping so sharply it felt like stepping into a freezer. I paused, my hand on the railing, trying to shake off the sensation, blaming it on my exhaustion. I moved through the hallway, closing the doors I'd opened earlier during my search, when something caught my eye in the corner of one of the rooms. The window was cracked open, a sliver of cold air seeping through, and on the sill, barely visible in the dim light, was the faint imprint of a shoe. I stared at it for what felt like an eternity, my mind struggling to process the impossible reality of what I was seeing. That window had been closed, I was certain of it, and the roof overhang beneath it was too high for anyone to reach without a ladder. My blood ran cold, a wave of dread crashing over me as I turned, listening to the house around me. The low creak of the floorboards, the rain against the roof, it all amplified my fear, a symphony of terror that confirmed the truth. Someone was in my house, right now, hiding in the shadows. I moved as quietly as I could, my breath shallow, my eyes darting to the open doors along the hallway, each one a potential hiding place for watching eyes. I made it downstairs, my heart pounding in my chest, and slipped into the garage, locking the door behind me as I fumbled for my phone. With trembling hands, I dialed 911, whispering my address to the operator, my voice barely audible over the roar of my own fear. It took 5 minutes for the first officer to arrive, an eternity in the suffocating silence of the garage where the rain outside was the only sound I could hear. I stepped onto the porch, the cold air biting at my skin, and let the officer in, my voice shaking as I explained what I'd found. I waited outside, the rain soaking through my clothes, as he searched the house, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. After what felt like hours but was only 2 minutes, I heard him call out from upstairs, his voice firm and commanding. He came down the steps, a man in handcuffs at his side, and my stomach dropped as I recognized him. The same man who'd knocked on my door earlier, his brown jacket and beanie unmistakable, his face now twisted with a terrible anger as he glared at me. The officer explained the horrifying truth. The man had climbed onto my roof, likely causing the thud I'd heard hours ago, and entered through the second-story window, a window I'd never thought to lock. He'd been hiding in my master bedroom, a mere 30 seconds from where I would have gone to sleep, oblivious to his presence. He'd even taken his shoes off to avoid leaving prints on the carpet, a calculated move that made the faint imprint on the sill a miracle of chance. The officer's words sent a shiver through me, the realization of how close I'd come to danger sinking in. The man's intentions were clearly malicious, a fact the judge later confirmed with a harsh sentence, but the terror of that night lingers. It's only been a few months and I still wake in the middle of the night, my heart racing, convinced that someone is hiding in my home, watching from the shadows, waiting for the rain to bring them back. I was on my way back from a weekend in Wisconsin, driving the 6-hour stretch to my home just outside Chicago. It was a last-minute trip to visit a friend, a chance to escape the city's noise and breathe the crisp air of the north. But I hadn't planned on leaving so late. 8 p.m. found me on the road, the dark pressing against my windows, with work waiting for me the next morning. That night I picked up a passenger I shouldn't have, and he left something behind that still haunts me. Wisconsin's northern reaches are a patchwork of flatlands and dense forests, dotted with small towns far from the bustling cities near the border. My friend's place was in one of these quiet hamlets where the roads twist through endless woods, the trees standing like silent guards under a moonless sky. I'd been driving for 30 minutes, the sun long gone, when the highway became a desolate ribbon of asphalt. Not another car in sight. The forest stretched on either side, a repetitive wall of shadows that lulled my tired eyes, threatening to pull me into sleep. I'd spent the weekend laughing and hiking with my friend, and the exhaustion weighed heavy on my shoulders, my eyelids drooping despite the radio's faint hum. For 2 hours I saw no one, the isolation sinking into my bones, making the night feel alive, watchful, as if it knew something I didn't. By 11 p.m., I was fighting to stay awake, my hands tight on the wheel, when I spotted a figure up ahead. A man stood on the shoulder, his thumb out, a lone silhouette against the endless trees. My first thought was simple. Company might keep me alert, a voice to break the monotony. I slowed down, the gravel crunching beneath my tires, and pulled up beside him, rolling down the window. "Hey, I just need a ride into the next town if you've got a spare seat," he said, his voice rough, tinged with fatigue. The darkness hid his features, but I could make out a buzz cut and stubble. A man in his 30s, maybe, dressed in a faded jacket. I hesitated, the isolation of the road pressing against me, but nodded, letting him into the back seat. I didn't think twice. Not then. As I pulled away, the weight of my decision settled in. What was he doing out here in the middle of the woods at this hour? I glanced at him in the rearview mirror, his face shrouded in shadow, his eyes locked on mine, with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. "So what brought you out here?" he asked, his tone flat, almost rehearsed. I told him about my weekend, my trip back to Chicago, trying to keep my voice steady. Then I turned the question on him. His lips curled into a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, I was just walking on a trail in the woods, got lost along the way, found the road and figured I'd catch a ride," he said, the words too smooth, too practiced. My gut twisted. There were no trails out here, not that I knew of. And even if there were, he'd have driven to get here. Why didn't he ask to go back to his car? The more I thought about it, the more his story unraveled, each word a thread, pulling tighter around my chest. I was wide awake now, every nerve on edge, the forest outside seeming to close in around us. 5 miles down the road, he spoke again, his voice sharp. "Stop here. Drop me off." I hesitated. The dense trees, looming on either side, but pulled over to the shoulder, the car idling in the dark. He opened the door and stepped out without a word, hurrying into the forest, his figure swallowed by the shadows. Relief flooded me, but it was short-lived. The back door hung open, and as I leaned over to close it, I saw something tucked under the passenger seat, a drawstring bag, its fabric worn and stained. Wasn't mine. I called after him, my voice trembling. "Hey, you left your bag." He stopped, turning back, his face pale in the moonlight, his eyes wide with a frustration that chilled me to the core. He hesitated, then stalked back, snatching the bag with a jerky motion before disappearing into the trees again. I slammed the door shut and sped off, my heart pounding, the road stretching endlessly before me. A few minutes later, a foul odor seeped into the car, sharp and metallic, growing stronger with every mile. It was coming from the back seat, from where the bag had been. My stomach churned, a sickening realization dawning as I drove, the smell wrapping around me like a shroud. 30 minutes later, I pulled into a gas station in a small town. The fluorescent lights a harsh contrast to the darkness I'd left behind. I grabbed my phone, its light trembling in my hand, and checked the back seat. There, on the carpet where the bag had sat, was a deep red stain, its edges wet, its scent unmistakable. Blood. I stumbled out of the car, nausea rising, and ran into the gas station, dialing 911 with shaking fingers. The police came, cutting out the stained carpet for testing, searching the area where I'd picked him up. But they found nothing, just a few footprints in the dirt, leading nowhere. He'd left that bag to frame me, to cover something unspeakable, and I'd carried it with me, a silent passenger I never wanted. Years later, I heard a story from another driver, a whispered tale of a man in those woods, a drifter who'd been linked to murders along lonely highways, leaving blood-soaked evidence in the cars of those who gave him a ride. They never caught him, but the stories lingered, a warning to those who drive alone at night. I don't know what was in that bag, or who he really was, but when I close my eyes, I still smell that metallic tang, and I see his eyes in the mirror, watching me from the dark. Some passengers never truly leave you. The warehouse was a cathedral of shadows, its machines humming secrets that weren't meant for human ears. Each night I worked alone, a solitary figure in a sprawling facility on the city's outskirts. tending to the endless rows of crates and equipment. My shift ran from dusk to dawn, a silent vigil in a place where the day's bustle faded into a mechanical drone. The air was thick with the scent of oil and dust, the overhead lights casting a sickly glow that never reached the corners. Something was alive in the dark, its voice calling from the steel, waiting for me to answer. The facility was a maze of steel shelves and hulking machines, their silhouettes looming like silent giants. I moved through my tasks, checking inventory, cleaning workstations, my footsteps echoing in the vastness. The night was young, the clock barely past midnight, but the silence was oppressive, broken only by the low hum of the ventilation system. I'd grown used to the solitude, the way the warehouse seemed to breathe, its walls holding stories I'd never know. Weeks ago, I'd heard a faint hum from the loading dock, not the usual machinery, but something softer, almost human. I'd found nothing, but the memory lingered, a seed of doubt. Tonight, that doubt felt heavier, the air charged with a presence I couldn't see. Then it came, a sound that wasn't sound, a whisper woven into the machine's hum, like a voice calling from nowhere. I froze, my clipboard slipping in my hands, the pen clattering to the concrete. It wasn't loud, but it was wrong. A low, guttural murmur that seemed to come from the walls themselves. My heart quickened, my eyes darting to the shadows, the light flickering overhead. You have to listen, a thought urged, an embedded command pulling me toward the sound. I set the clipboard down, my boots scuffing the floor, and followed the whisper, its cadence growing clearer. Words I couldn't catch but felt in my bones. The air grew colder, the scent of oil sharper as I moved deeper into the warehouse, past crates and into a narrow corridor. The corridor was dim, its single bulb buzzing faintly, casting jagged shadows on the steel walls. The whisper faded, then returned, stronger, from a storage room at the end, its door slightly ajar. My breath caught, my flashlight trembling in my grip, its beams slicing through the dark. Something's there. The realization was a weight, pressing against my chest. I approached, each step a descent, the hum of the machines a trance loop that blurred reality. The door was heavy, its surface pitted with rust, and beyond it, the room was a void, swallowing my light. I pushed it open, the hinges silent, revealing cavern of crates and forgotten equipment, their shapes distorted in the gloom. Is anyone there? My voice was thin, echoing back unanswered. The whisper stopped, the silence worse, a void that felt alive. I swept my flashlight, catching glints of metal, the air stale and heavy. Then I saw it. A shadow, fleeting, darting between crates. Too fast to be human. My pulse roared, my body rigid, the beam shaking in my hand. You're not alone. The fear was a sensory overload. The cold biting my skin, the oil's stench choking my lungs. I stepped back, my boot brushing something. A crate, toppled, its contents spilled, papers and tools scattered like a warning. The shadow moved again, closer. A form I couldn't define. Its presence, a pressure in the dark. My mind screamed to run, but my legs were lead, trapped in a dream where the warehouse was no longer mine. I backed toward the door, my flashlight sweeping, and caught a glimpse. A figure, tall, cloaked in shadow, standing at the room's edge, motionless. Its eyes glinted, twin points of light, watching, waiting. It knows I'm here. The thought was a blade, cutting through reason. I turned, sprinting down the corridor, the whisper chasing me. Now a hiss, a call to return. The main hall loomed, its lights flickering, the machine's hum a mocking chorus. I grabbed my radio, my fingers numb, and called for help. My voice, breaking as I stumbled toward the exit, the night outside a faint promise of safety. I burst into the parking lot, the cold air a shock, my breath visible in the dark. I stood under a streetlight, my flashlight trained on the door, waiting for the figure to emerge. It's still inside. The fear anchored me, tying the machine's hum to my dread. Police arrived, their lights flashing, and searched the warehouse, finding nothing but the toppled crate, its contents undisturbed. The cameras told a different story. A man, wiry in a dark coat, slipping through a service hatch, his face obscured, a tool in hand. He'd stood in the storage room watching, moments before I entered, leaving as I ran. He was there, inches away, his shadow part of the dark. I still work the night shift, but the warehouse is no longer a job. It's a prison of fear. Every hum, every flicker is him, waiting in the shadows. The machine's drone haunts me, a whisper that never fades. The dark anchors my terror, a reminder of the voice that called me, and the figure that's still out there listening. You've heard them all. 15 stories, each more disturbing than the last. But the truly frightening thing isn't what happened to them. It's what might happen to you. You see, horror doesn't ask for permission. It shows up. Unexpected, uninvited, unexplained. And now that you've opened this door, these stories may stay with you longer than you think. That creak in the hallway tonight? That flicker in the corner of your vision? Maybe it's nothing. Or maybe it's just the beginning. There are more tales, stranger ones, darker ones. And if you're brave enough to keep going, make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications, and return for the next descent. Because the night isn't done with you yet, and neither are the stories. The next time you listen, it might not be from the outside in. It might be from inside the story itself.